night, growing questions after another round of violent clashes in Chicago between federal agents and community members outraged.
It started before dawn, the kind of hour when Chicago still sleeps, lights flickering in apartment windows, Lake Michigan breathing fog into the streets. Then, the silence broke. The low thump of helicopter blades echoed across North Center, rattling windows and hearts alike. Within seconds, flashing red and blue lights painted the brick walls of homes. Homeland Security agents fanned out, weapons drawn, their shadows stretching long under the street lamps. A daycare became the center of a federal storm. No warning, no explanation, just the sound of boots, engines, and stecklist. Fear. Residents grabbed phones, filming through curtains as armored trucks rolled in. Some whispered that it was a drug raid. Others, that cartel suspects were inside. But the truth, at that moment, was chaos. A city already struggling with cartel corridors, now watching federal power unfold on its doorstep. This wasn't just another raid. It was a signal that the battle for Chicago's control between law, politics, and the cartels had just entered a new phase. Stay with us because what happened next would shake City Hall itself. Within hours, Chicago's morning, newsrooms were flooded with calls. Neighbors describing masked agents, children crying, helicopters circling low over residential blocks. At first, it sounded like an isolated operation, one daycare, one warrant. But by sunrise, reports spread from Pilsen to Little Village. Simultaneous raids, multiple addresses, coordinated entry teams. This was no routine sweep. It was a joint federal strike led by the Drug Enforcement Administration and Homeland Security Investigations. The two agencies now spearheading America's fight against the synthetic drug networks that feed on border chaos and urban sprawl. Documents later confirmed it. The operation was part of a broader OCD ETF mission, the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force targeting distribution cells believed to be linked to Mexican cartel suppliers. Federal agents called it precision enforcement. Residents called it a war zone. Helicopters hovered over parking lots. Tactical units breached doors in rapid succession. Streets were blocked before dawn commuters could react. And across the city, phones lit up with one question: what exactly is happening? Behind closed doors, officials briefed the closing Department of Justice. More than 40 suspects under surveillance. Evidence of large-scale narcotics and weapons movement through Chicago's West Side warehouses. It was the biggest coordinated enforcement push since the DEA's Spector campaign. Earlier that year, the national fentanyl crackdown that netted over 600 arrests across the country. But Chicago wasn't just another city on that list. It was a nerve center, a distribution hub, a place where cartel logistics meet American infrastructure. And now, the federal government was turning its full attention here, right in the middle of City Hall's fiercest debate over how far that power should reach. As the raids rippled across the city, another battle was brewing, not in the streets, but inside City Hall. Only hours after the first helicopters lifted off, reporters crowded into the marble-floored press room, demanding answers. Mayor Brandon Johnson stepped up to the podium, his tone firm, his message unmistakable. Chicago will not be used as a staging ground for unchecked federal operations. For months, the administration had been drawing a hard line against Homeland Security's tactics. The mayor's ice-free zone executive order barred immigration or narcotics raids on city-owned property without prior approval. The policy wasn't just symbolic, it was a declaration that local government intended to set its own boundaries against Washington's reach. But now, with armored trucks rolling through neighborhoods before dawn, that line looked blurred. Federal agents insisted their operations targeted cartel logistics and fentanyl supply chains, not immigration. Still, community leaders saw it differently. To them, it felt like the same machinery that had once divided families at the border, now moving through Chicago's neighborhoods. Behind closed doors, city lawyers reviewed warrants. Council members questioned whether City Hall had even been notified. Rumors swirled that the DEA and Homeland Security Task Force had bypassed municipal coordination entirely, a move that some officials called a breach of trust. In public, both sides spoke of safety. In private, they spoke of power. And in a city long defined by its politics, one question began echoing through every corridor. Who really controls Chicago, the mayor's office or the federal? Badge at the door? While headlines focused on flashing lights and sirens, deep inside the city's federal building, the real operation was unfolding quietly. It wasn't a single raid, but a web. a multi-agency structure that had been months in the making, stitched together by the DEA, Homeland, Security Investigations, and the U.S. Attorney's Office under the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, known as OCDETF. Inside this network, data moved faster than bullets. Agents tracked encrypted messages, intercepted wire transfers, and traced cash couriers across state lines. Dozens of analysts sat behind screens, following a digital paper trail that led from cartel suppliers in Mexico to stash houses in suburban Chicago. Every lead fed into a central database, cross-referenced, verified, and matched against months of undercover surveillance. Court filings would later reveal what they'd been watching: a series of warehouse fronts along the I-55 and I-290 corridors, where truck shipments disguised as produce deliveries were used to hide narcotics. Financial investigators noticed unusual bank activity, structured deposits just under the reporting threshold, often within minutes of each other, all tied to the same shell companies. When the DEA finally moved, they didn't come alone. Homeland Security brought their tactical response teams. The Chicago Police Department provided perimeter control, and the ATF monitored for illegal firearms. Each raid, each warrant, was one part of a massive federal chessboard, a single coordinated strike intended to collapse an entire distribution ring at once. Officials later confirmed 47 suspects charged, several of them with ties to known trafficking networks. Seized, millions in tourniquet, cash, hundreds of pounds of narcotics, and dozens of firearms. To the public, it looked like a victory. To those inside the investigation, it was just the beginning, because the patterns they uncovered hinted at something larger, a network that didn't stop in Chicago. It started there. Chicago has always been more than a city, it's a crossroads. Every rail line, every interstate, every cargo hub running through the Midwest converges here. To federal agents, it's a logistical goldmine. To the cartels, it's the perfect artery. For years, the Sinaloa and Jalisco knew. Generation cartels have used Chicago not just as a market, but as a command post. The DEA once called it El Norte's distribution capital. From suburban warehouses near Bolingbrook and Cicero, synthetic opioids were moved north to Wisconsin, east to Indiana, west toward Iowa, a quiet, constant current of poison hidden in ordinary traffic. The investigation unearthed shipments disguised as frozen meat, construction materials, and imported fruits. Packages sealed with double linings, marked with coded stickers only couriers could read. On paper, they looked like small businesses. In reality, they were fronts, tiny cogs in a billion-dollar pipeline stretching from Sinaloa's labs to America's streets. Homeland Security's analysts traced wire transfers to shell companies registered under innocent-sounding names: Midwest Produce Exports, Northern Freight, Logistics. Every transfer matched the movement of product, often ending in a cash pickup along the I-80 corridor. It wasn't random, it was organized, efficient, militarized. Federal reports later connected some of these routes to historic Guerreros Unidos networks, the same organization, once accused of running heroin through Chicago to fund operations in Mexico. It was a chilling reminder. Even when leadership falls, the structure survives. Change the name, shift the routes, rebrand the business, the flow continues. To the public, the raids looked like isolated strikes. But to those studying the data, Chicago's raids were just one pulse in a vast continental heartbeat. A sign that the cartel's influence no longer stopped at the border. It adapted, evolved, and embedded itself in the machinery of American commerce. Behind every warrant and headline, there were people each carrying their own version of the story. Inside that North Center daycare, a teacher said she froze when agents stormed the building, thinking it was a mistake. Outside, parents held their children close, unsure if the danger was over or just beginning. Federal spokespeople described the arrest as surgical, aimed at dismantling a distribution network, not punishing a community. But on the ground, the difference blurred. When armored trucks line the block, precision feels like occupation. Local activists gathered by sunset, holding signs reading, "Safety, without fear, and no raids in our schools." They demanded transparency. Why that location? Why that hour? And what intelligence justified such force? Reporters pressed for answers, and eventually, fragments of the picture emerged. The daycare had shared a parking lot with a storage unit, used to launder cash and move narcotics. To the agents, it was logistics. To the residents, it was trauma. Inside federal offices, agents worked through the night logging evidence, counting cash stacks, photographing seized ledgers, analyzing encrypted phones. Each officer, each Investigator was part of a larger machine driven by duty, burdened by doubt. One agent later admitted off record, "We chase shadows. Every time we cut off one head, 3 more appear." That fatigue, that endless cycle, was visible in every face leaving the field that morning. Some looked relieved, others haunted, because they knew beneath every takedown is a human cost. And in Chicago, the lines between justice, policy, and pain were starting to blur. By the next morning, the raids had ended, but the political tremors had only just begun. At City Hall, security tightened. Cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions no one wanted to answer. Who authorized the raids? Did the federal task force coordinate with the mayor's office? And if not, how had agents moved through Chicago under a sanctuary city order? Behind closed doors, the tone was far less diplomatic. Council members demanded briefings. Legal teams combed through emergency communications logs. Leaked memos suggested that Homeland Security had bypassed certain notification protocols, triggering accusations of federal overreach. The mayor's staff framed it as a matter of TNT flash. Sovereignty. Chicago governs Chicago. But for Washington, it was about jurisdiction, the duty to act when narcotics flow through national arteries, no matter whose city it is. The Inspector General's office, already investigating a separate City Hall transparency issue, suddenly found itself at the center of a broader storm. Critics argued that if City Hall couldn't keep track of its own internal dealings, how could it oversee federal incursions? Others warned against conflating bureaucratic missteps with federal operations, urging restraint. As the debate intensified, so did the narrative war. Local networks ran split-screen coverage, one half showing seized contraband, the other half showing protests outside City Hall. Public opinion fractured. Some praised the DEA for taking action against cartel pipelines. Others accused them of turning neighborhoods into battlegrounds. And in the heart of it all stood the mayor trying to project calm while navigating the fine line between protecting civil liberties and cooperating with the federal war on drugs. For Chicago, it wasn't just a political standoff. It was a test of control, accountability, and the city's identity in a nation still struggling to define who truly holds the power, the people who govern it, or the forces sworn to protect it. Far beyond Chicago's skyline, the same story was playing out across America. From Phoenix to Atlanta, Dallas to Cleveland, federal agents were waging what the DEA calls the most coordinated drug enforcement offensive in U.S. history. Under the banner of Operation Spector, more than 600 arrests had been made in just 1 week, a sweeping attempt to dismantle synthetic drug networks before they could reach the streets. To Washington, Chicago was not an exception, it was an example. A case study in how cartel networks exploit urban logistics and fragmented jurisdiction. Every container at the rail yards, every truck stop along I-55, every cash transfer across state lines told the same story. Organized crime had evolved, and so had the agencies chasing it. But with that evolution came questions of oversight. Civil liberty groups warned that federal efficiency often arrives at the expense of local accountability. In Congress, committees debated how far Homeland Security's mandate should stretch before it collides with the rights of the cities it operates in. And as the fentanyl crisis deepened, claiming more than 70,000 American lives a year, the nation seemed trapped between two truths: the urgent need for enforcement and the growing fear of what unchecked power can become. For Chicago, this wasn't just another operation on the nightly news. It was a reflection, a mirror held up to the country's struggle between justice and control, security and sovereignty. Because when federal badges and local authority clash under the same flag, the question stops being who wins and starts being who's accountable. As the sun rises over the Chicago River, the city exhales, traffic hums, sirens fade, life resumes its rhythm. But beneath the calm, the questions linger. Who gave the final order? How deep do the cartel ties run? And when the next raid comes, will City Hall know before it begins? The files will move from field offices to federal servers. Agents will brief superiors, update warrants, and prepare for what they call Phase 2. Politicians will trade statements. Communities will trade glances of fear and fatigue. Yet the truth remains. This was never just about one city. It's about a system fighting its own reflection. Law against law, power against policy, justice against its own limits. Chicago sleeps again tonight. But somewhere, in a warehouse, on a highway, or behind a closed government door, the next move is already being planned. Because in the war between control and corruption, there's never a final raid, only the next one.